This is Jake Ciely, and I'm the blown ACL that ruins your football season.
Good news, everyone! Let's get dangerous.
This is so cool!
I know!
It feels so right!
It's Jake Ciely.
I'm sorry, who is this?
Nice try, Moonman! Pretending not to know Earth's greatest mastermind!
You just made the list!
I thought you said that was a myth.
Just because it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true.
If you all blindly follow my plan, we may have a chance.
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No, burn.
Game on, you Ducks. It is week 8 of fantasy football season, and nothing better than week 8 having tons of buys, tons of injuries, tons of what's going to happen this week. So make sure you're checking that link for the updated rankings all the way through Sunday morning. Also, don't forget on Thursdays, you can chat live on the Discord channel over at The Athletics. See my wonderful face, not the wonderful backdrop, not so much my face. And we can talk about anything over there, rankings, but ask any questions you want. Few things before we get to today's terrific guest to talk about. A few that I've seen common questions about. The Carolina backfield, I think we're fine with both of them. I see them as better versions of the Seahawks, only because they can both have value every single week, which the Seahawks seem to kind of trade. And Charbonnet's stuck in mostly a goal line role. He'll sometimes see more than that. But they're somewhere between the Seahawks and what was the best season ever that we saw from the Falcons of Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, both having RB1 value. They're in the middle. They'll be fringe, kind of low-end RB2s. I actually have them back-to-back this week against the Bills. So that's the situation there. Some others, there's a lot of talk about Oronde Gadsden, and I'm fine picking him up at tight end and going with him forward, but Chargers aren't going to throw 55 times every single game. Somebody has to take the back seat. We're going to talk about them today, but I wanted to talk about tight ends in general because I talked about it earlier this year. I said talk a lot right there, but I am talking, so there you go. I guess that works. Whatever it might be. I talked a lot about tight ends earlier this year, and a lot about the tight end situation was I cautioned and said for people not to have two or continually chase your tail, as in you're chasing the production. So you would chase Gadsden, you would chase Fannon's good game, you would chase, the Mark Andrews touchdown, because outside of basically Ferguson, Kittle, now that he's back, and I know he's coming off a 0, but that was matchup and a lot to do with the situation that they had going into that game. Tyler Warren, Kraft, and a healthy Brock Bowers, that'd be about it. Those are the only ones I would trust week in and week out to give production. I'm not saying you're obviously starting them every single week. That's not a shock to you. But to chase the Pitts touchdown or Dalton Schultz coming off a good game, which he should have another. We're going to talk about him too. To chase, then chase and chase, you get my point, is that you end up missing a lot of times because you already missed the good game. Then you put that person in your lineup. No guarantee that just like any tight end after the top 5 are going to basically have 50-50 games going forward. Like 50% of their games will be usable and good. 50% of their games going to be aggravating, banging your head against the wall. There are some where you can chase tendencies like Cade Otton with no Mike Evans and no Ibuka or no Godwin. Mason Taylor right now you can kind of chase just because he's the last man standing, but that doesn't always pay off, as seen with Fannin. Something that was the weather last week. Even so, again, you're chasing. We chased Goddard, and I know it wasn't as good of a matchup last week. It was before that, but Goddard had a down game. He can rebound right against the Giants. And I know this might sound like I'm kind of being harsh or being negative. I never intend that. I just talk emphatically, by the way. So hopefully you can understand. I'm never being like, oh, you guys are dumb. That's how I talk. And I know I come across that way, which is why I embraced All in Heel a bunch of years ago as a joke. But Hunter Henry will rebound. The point being is that I would rather just roll one out every single week. If there's a tendency that falls off, which I go back to like Dalton Schultz right now, if Nico Collins, then you kind of ride him the same way we were doing Cade Otton with no options there. Jauan Johnson at the beginning of the season until the other pieces came back. But as just seen last week, Jauan Johnson bounced back for a single game, but I'm not going to go back and start chasing him again. So that's the tight end position. And I think the biggest mistake people make is waiver tight ends. And it's like, oh, half my fab is gone because I kept chasing a few bucks here on tight ends and never got production anyway. So long story short, don't chase tight ends. What else can we talk about here? Although I do, again, like Dalton Schultz's matchup. Garrett Wilson plays, but he missed practice as of today. Have to watch him, have to watch Lamar Jackson. Who else do we have to watch to see? The Washington Commanders situation, that one's actually more easier than you might think. So McLaurin and Debo both play. Not the best matchup, but you play both of them. If there is no Terry McLaurin, Chris Moore is the answer to step in. And then if McLaurin plays but no Debo, then Jalen Lane steps in. Speaking of Jalen Noel, I like a lot. I think Rich is going to agree with me, so I'm going to save that for that topic. Christian Watson, if he's back, he'll be inside my top 40. If he's not, then Matthew Golden bumps up probably close to the top 30, if not the top 30 where Romeo Doubs is. And what else do we have? Do we have any more situations for you guys to worry about? Texans, but I'm going to talk to Rich about that. And running backs, pretty self-evident this week. So, yeah, let's get to this week's great guest that you're, trust me, going to love. All right, and I'd say, if I ranked friends in the industry, Rich would definitively be inside the top 10, if not higher, because known him for a really long time, got together in DC back in the Flex days, one of the closest, I'd say, friends I do have in the business. We love video games, we talk about the same stuff, we hang out and watch SummerSlam. If you're not following at Lord Reeves, you need to pause the episode right now, go fix that, and then you can come back and keep listening, but make sure you're also checking out. I'll let you tell everybody what you got going on, Rich. If you wanted the insights, and then about 50 more, you need to be reading Rich's stuff over at Sharp Football, but you tell everybody about it.
Yeah, I take a lot of pride in the work I do in breaking down the games. It's a saturated market. You've been doing this longer than I have. You were in the field, the space before even I got in, and that was over a decade ago. So a lot of young people that are sharp, they're hungry, they're putting a lot of work in, they're finding new angles. I'm trying to stay on my toes and combat all these people trying to come for the throne. So I'm putting a lot of work and pouring a lot of effort into my content, trying to make it unique, trying to find unique edges for people to bet in terms of player props, setting lineups, DFS, all those things. So yeah. But I'm appreciative of the industry, man, and keep me on my toes, not letting me lollygag.
And that's the best part about your articles over there too, is like there's so much information that it will help you whether you're doing betting, DFS, lineups, it's everything across the board. But we're going to talk, as I always do, 5 big questions I kind of have for the guests that I come on, and they're pretty much the bigger topics of things that are happening right now. Rich and I were just talking about the injury news has been so brutal this year, and we were waiting until like late Fridays, but at least right before we started, we do find out that, not surprisingly, Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin are out for Week 8. Not surprising because the Bucs' Week 9 bye is coming up, but it works in well because I wanted to ask you first about Tez Johnson. So I had him in the waiver column last week. He was kind of like, hey, you got to wait till Monday Night Football, Ibuka could play. And then, of course, we saw the Mike Evans injury, and that changed a lot into addition. And so this was where I went with it, Rich, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts. I compared him to Tank Dell, and I said, but he's not quite Tank Dell. But even if we got 90% Tank Dell, and I told you 90% Tank Dell is now the number 2 for the Buccaneers, people would be going nuts. People would be like, he's a top 30 wide receiver, if not more. Obviously, the cloud hanging over our heads is, what is Chris Godwin at this point? Like, he's coming back after the bye, sure, cool, but he didn't look too good pre-injury or re-aggravation of the injury again and again. So, like, where are you on Tez Johnson and trying to figure out the Bucs wide receivers? I know for this week it's very simple because Godwin is out, but going forward, if you haven't had waivers, if somebody did already pick him up, would you kind of see it as a buy high, or do you think that Godwin's just going to make this a mess outside of Ibuka?
And we might get Jalen McMillan back at some point too. Who knows, right? What's funny is you go back to the draft when Ibuka got drafted, everybody's like, why would they take him? Why would they take him? And just last year, it's like everyone forgot that we lived through a 4-week stretch where the Buccaneers didn't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, and Baker Mayfield really struggled. And they're like, oh, we don't want that to happen again. Plus, the injury to Chris Godwin, Mike Evans' contract, plus his age and injury history. Like, I was like, oh, this is kind of like a pretty shrewd draft pick, given everything that happened. And, now we're not even with Ibuka getting elevated to higher degrees than we thought earlier in the season than he would be at. We've got Tez Johnson already working in, guys like Cameron Johnson. So yeah, I don't mind taking a shot at him. Like you said, the Tank Dell, very a lot of overlap, especially when they were used in college, obviously smaller guys too, but near the line of scrimmage, but can be explosive. What's funny is remember both those guys kind of like bricked like their 40 times and like they weren't good. Like Tez Johnson, everyone freaked out. They're like, oh, this dude's 160 pounds and he ran a 4.5. Like he's dead to us. But then they do like those tracking drills at the combine and like he is like the fastest guy on go routes. Like in those drills, and it's just like, yeah, just another piece of the puzzle you try to figure out. But I don't mind taking a shot because Baker Mayfield's playing so well. I will say, like, probably big picture, we do get Evans back. Evans is like the big linchpin, right? Because he's going to be the target earner and the money targets. Like he's always the red zone guy. So I think he's probably more like floor based, full PPR kind of flex worthy. This week though, before bye apocalypse. Have you done wide receiver rankings this week? It's not pretty.
He's number 30 for me.
It's not pretty, man. There's some elevated guys that are usually in my 60s, maybe, that are like in the 30s and 40s this week.
I look at the 40s and I'm like, I don't really want to start these. I mean, hell, I have him at 30 right behind Xavier Worthy. And as of right now, Terry McLaurin, which might not be there. Deebo Samuel might not be there. Like, there's names that, like, he could move up, probably get close to the top 25 because, as you mentioned, in the 40s, Troy Franklin, Ian Manor, Downs, Leggett. Like, I don't want to start any of these guys, but like
we will.
I know we have to, unfortunately. All right, so the next one. Speaking of, like, this is a little different. There's a lot of takes on this, and this is, I figured, a really good one for you because you have a lot of data and, like mentioned, your articles. The Chargers situation, and it's not just the Chargers wide receivers. Now we have Oronde Gadsden get into the mix, which, you know, there was a lot of people that thought he could be a matchup problem, and he is. A lot of people, myself, thought that it might be more of year 2 than year 1, but it's starting to happen in year 1. Mm-hmm. It happened initially with Quentin Johnston being out, and then we saw it still happen last week. Now, we don't expect Justin Herbert to throw 55 times a game, but the big issue we had before Johnston got hurt was trying to wrap our minds around the fact that Johnston's the best and Ladd is the worst for us in fantasy. Like, that was the truth we had. And then Johnston comes back, saves his day with a touchdown. Ladd woke up while Johnston was hurt and then also had 15 targets. They just didn't pay off last week. But Gadsden was also a thing. So now, and I'm not telling you, you know, Rich, your answer can't change. But just how are you feeling now of, like, what this pecking order is going to look like? Because I have a feeling it might kind of lean towards Packers of past years where it's going to be frustrating and you almost have to just start them all and understand the lumps are going to come.
That is kind of where I am with it, because this is a team that's very high pass rate over expectation, at least until we get O'Mary and Hampton back. We'll see if that changes. They were starting to shift a little bit around the offensive line injuries. So I do think that you just play all these guys, you know, attached to Justin Herbert. I think there's gonna be some volatility and you just kind of live with, you know, the Catawampus production as you get it. I will say if you are, you know, tying my arms up and you want me to rank these guys, though, I still want to bet, I think, on Quentin Johnston the most big picture, because, like, he's the archetypical player that like kind of has the largest ceiling for fantasy football. He still gets the deep targets, he gets end zone targets. He's the type of pass catcher that when he's hitting, teams build their game plan around. And we started to see that a little bit. Remember, the opening 3 games this season, Justin Herbert had a depth of target over 9 yards downfield. He was throwing the ball, pushing the ball. That was Quentin Johnston. Then they played the Giants. Joe Alt gets hurt. The Giants are just wrecking them too. Like, that was the game they moved Abdul Carter to edge. Like, he's just going nuts. But even in that game with Justin Herbert's ADOT, like, drastically reducing, it was 6.5 yards that game. Quentin Johnston, first 3 target shares, his highest of the season. He had 13 targets. And you're like, wow, they're just like building the game planned around this guy. Then he gets hurt, kind of opens up the runway. You see some more stuff for Ladd. And then you see Oronde Gadsden get involved. And, you know, now we'll see what happens with Johnson coming back. I do think it'll be volatile. I think this week's matchup, I think you also just can want to play, like, the matchups around these guys. Like, I think this week where the Vikings have been vulnerable is a signal for, like, more Quentin Johnston stuff. They've been vulnerable down the field and vulnerable to outside receivers. So I think that aids a guy like Quentin Johnston. He's also playing the most snaps of the guys when he is on the field.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen is kind of like the foxhole guy. That's what I call him. If you look at Keenan Allen, like, he's third on the team of the receivers and routes, but he goes, he's 5th in the NFL in targets on third down, and he has 46% of the red zone targets. That's what I call it. You get the foxhole targets, the money downs, the rapport downs, right? But if you look at, you know, if you're playing Keenan Allen, you also know, outside of last week where we had all the targets because they threw so many times, that he's largely been like, you ask yourself the question, did Keenan Allen score a touchdown this week? If the box is checked yes, he was usable in fantasy. If the box was checked no, probably not very good. And then, you know, Ladd is the guy that kind of does like a little bit of the best of the both world stuff and kind of gets cannibalized a little bit by the other 2 guys, because Keenan takes more red zone targets to him, more third down targets. Quentin Johnston's getting more downfield stuff. So they do all kind of hurt each other. I do want to point out too that, like, Gadsden, like, while they'll sound like I'm throwing cold water on them, I think you just bet on guys that show you this early in their careers that they're good football players. First of all, I think you want to be aggressive with him, pick him up if he was dropped. Definitely all of those things. You want to roster him and see where things go. But last week, you know, definitely got masked by the just sheer volume that the offensive had. I mean, he was the tight end 27 in target rate per route run last week. He was the tight end 17 in route runs per drop back. So when you get, you know, 55 dropbacks, it's going to elevate all those counting targets. It makes 9 targets look like in a game that they should have been 5, right? So Yeah, and I do think this matchup is a little bit weaker for him than it is a signal for some of the other guys. But again, 6 teams are on bye. You're probably playing him in some leagues and just taking what comes away with it. But I think like your analogy is like Packers with passing volume, because the frustrating thing about the Packers is they don't throw.
Right.
But this is like a team that has thrown the ball since the back half of last year, and with attachment to a good quarterback. I think you just kind of play these guys and you just say, hey, I'm going to live with some lean weeks. But that's the way fantasy football is being played this year anyways, at the wide receiver position. A lot of volatility at wide receiver this year.
Well, yeah, I had JJ Zacharyson on, and he was saying, like, there's 10 good wide receivers, and, like, good as in, like, you know that you're just going to get something every single week. Because, like, after that, it's basically, you're like, even your wide receiver twos, there's going to be bad weeks, and there's going to be multiple bad weeks, unfortunately. But speaking of wide receivers, I want to phrase this one completely a different way. And I've already kind of given my take on this one, but I'm curious what you think. And this is a just very simple question. Joe Flacco has looked great through 2 games for the Bengals. Is it as easy as saying, Rich, it's all been fixed? We can trust Chase and Higgins again.
It hasn't all been fixed, but can we trust them? I mean, you're definitely feeling great about the situation. You know, I was someone when the trade first happened, I was like, oh, this is definitely better. He's going to be better than Jake Browning. Like, I know it's going to be better, but like, is it going to be marginal? Like, is it going to be a significant improvement? But like everything about what Flacco is doing actually has instilled more confidence in these past 2 weeks, because he's also making the offensive line better. I mean, so the last 2 weeks, he's only been pressured on 27% and 35% of his dropbacks. Those rates are 8th and 13th best. And that's by facing the Packers and the Steelers, right?
Yeah,
he's getting the ball out of his hands. These past 2 weeks, he's got the second fastest rate to throw. And then in week 6, he had the fastest rate to throw that week. And he's also been accurate. Only 7.6% of his throws have been inaccurate. That's the 7th best of these past weeks, again, against Steelers, Packers. So he's not making mistakes, and he's keeping the offense on schedule. That's what you like. Now, in his career, Joe Flacco has turned the ball over. So I assume we are going to have like some spots still where Flacco does have some mistake games. But the Bengals like brought him in. They're just letting him rip 45, 47 pass attempts, throwing the ball 3% over pass rate expectations. They were 11% over expectations last week. So it's definitely good. And you look at the schedule, like it opens up now. We just named Steelers, Packers. Like now you get Jets, Bears at home. They have a bye week. We'll see like if Burrow ends up coming back towards the end. They have a Dolphins playoff game. Like it just gives you a little bit more confidence now in terms of playing these guys. Than where it was probably going to be like, oh yeah, Chase could pop off, but is it going to be matchup dependent? Now also, like, is Chase Brown going to be able to come back from the grave a little bit? Like, you know, against, especially in these games, right? Like you're at home, they're favored this week against the Jets, who have a good run defense, but it's a home environment where they're favored, still have a mid 20-point team total. Objectively, you would just say like, hey, we're going to plug the running back in and just take what happens in this spot. Bears have stopped the run better since their bye, but that was also against 2 teams that have really struggled with to run the football the last few weeks. And the Commanders, their run game has basically died the last 2 weeks. The Saints haven't been able to run the ball for weeks, so they could be vulnerable next week too. So maybe even Chase Brown's back a little bit from the grave, but you got to be feeling good about just the infrastructure that Joe Flacco's changed from what we had with Jake Browning.
I can see it right now, Rich. I know it's completely a sidebar, but man, watch the Jets get their first win as everybody takes the Bengals in Survivor, because that's going to be the super popular pick. We're like, oh, we get to use the Bengals, and then everybody's going to do it, and it's going to be like, oh, they got their first win, and just ruins everything. But speaking of messes, so to speak, the Texans situation, I wanted to look at it 2 different ways. Like, if Nico Collins plays, that's not the conversation. The conversation is no Nico Collins. And I've been watching this one closely because I don't know where you were on Jaden Higgins, but I definitely missed on that one. I really thought that drafting him in the 2nd round, his ability, I compared it to Marvin Jones, and the fact that they guaranteed his entire contract in the 2nd round was like, oh, they're going to let him get the opportunity to be the number 2. He's not the number 2. He's been behind Xavier Hutchinson the entire year. And with Christian Kirk stepping out, which made sense because who do you want to replace Christian Kirk with is Jalen Noel because of their skill sets. Jalen Noel did step up. He was the number 2 in this game, as we saw. But I'm sure you've seen it too. They started with Hutchinson as the 2. Jalen Noel stepped in and actually was the most productive, as we know. But once Nico Collins left, that's where Higgins saw his uptick finally, which made the sense of like, Higgins is the replacement for Collins. Why are you drafting a replacement in the 2nd round? I don't know. But let's paint the picture of, if there is no Nico Collins, are you chasing a Noel? Obviously, with no Christian Kirk, let's say Collins and Kirk are out. Are we going with Noel because at least he's been producing, or are we going to try and go down this Higgins road? And then to pull off of that too, your thoughts on Woody Marks as a whole, just because we're talking Texans.
Yeah, pretty messy spot here for the Texans. The offense, too, largely outside of the Tennessee Titans game, and then just playing a depleted Baltimore defense that was just ravaged in that game. This offense has not put a lot on paper that makes that still even with Nico Collins, right?
That's kind of saying it nicely too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst offenses in the league outside of those 2 weeks. Infrastructure again is just really poor here. There's a lot of systemic failure in this offense. Nick Ciely not running a lot of pre-snap motion, not a lot of play action, not doing a lot of things that you thought he would have learned from working under Josh McDaniels and Sean McVay. Like, he hasn't really not done any of the things that those guys do. And it's been frustrating. I mean, dude, they're giving goal line carries like Braxton Berrios on Monday night. What is happening in this offense?
Who would have thought we'd be like, bring back Bobby Slowick?
Yeah. But I will say, if it's just a one-off for 1 week, if you're asking me to bet on one of these guys, I would go with Noel in particular matchup. Just because the 49ers have just been where they've been beat is in the interior and in the slot. So he played 81% of his slaps in the slot. Noel, that is. 49ers are 29th in yards per target to slot receivers, 28th in touchdown rate. Against outside receivers, they are 4th in touchdown rate, 9th in yards per target. Lenore's played really well. So I would say if you're making me chase a guy this week, it would be Noel. But also, if you're making me bet on one pass catcher, I would just play Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz would be my bet. I would bet on Dalton Schultz leading. It's like the K. Dotton effect, right? Remember K. Dotton, when all the dudes are out for the Bucs. We didn't talk about it when we did the Tez Johnson thing, but because they have more receivers this year. But Dalton Schultz, with Nico Collins off the field, 28% of the team targets on Monday night. The 49ers, since they lost Fred Warner, they allow 7 catches for 62 yards to Kyle Pitts. K. Dotton in that game 2 weeks ago after Fred Warner got hurt, all of his receptions and targets came after Fred Warner left the game. So I would say Dalton Schultz this week would be my absolute bet. But if you're making me pick receiver, it would be Jalen Noel. And then the running backs, it's just been up and down, right? You still don't believe in the offensive line, them being able to, again, systemic failure, that they're going to be able to run the football consistently for the remainder of the season. So what do we really have? I think it's a little bit of, you'd hold Woody Marks because he's got some opportunity. If he was to just take over the backfield, you would play him as like an RB2, like flex type guy. This week you might have to use him. The 49ers are bad against receiving backs. That would be kind of like where the signal is for Woody Marks as a player. But you don't feel like really any confidence because it could just be, the usage here could be all over the place, right? I don't think there's any consistency. I'm ready to lock in and say, this is set in stone. This is how it's going to be moving forward. I think there's still just a lot of volatility in an offense that I don't believe is going to be very good as well.
Which is the big problem. Yeah.
Right.
At least also you do got the negative game script pointing in Mark's favor, which you would expect a little bit this week as well. So speaking of the 49ers, let's close out our 5 topics before we get to the fun questions. Making sense of the 49ers. I'm going to give you my waterfall chart, or I guess we need what's his face, Charlie Day to come in and kind of do the whole thing and put all the lines everywhere.
Yeah, Pepe Silva.
Yeah, I know. This is how I feel, and this is assuming health, because the biggest thing, and I joked about it on Twitter, I was like, could somebody tell me if Jennings is healthy or not? Because we go from, oh, he's going to be fine, he's going to play on the night game, and then we find out after the game he's like, oh, I have 5 broken ribs and 17 twisted ankles, and then we're like, there's no way he's healthy, and then he goes out last week and it's like, by the way, I'm off the injury report and I'm fine. Apparently I've done some magic elixir that the broken ribs aren't a thing anymore. And I've always said this, when Jennings is healthy, and I don't know that there is 100% healthy Jennings, but when there is a healthy, in quotes, Jennings, he is the number one, whether it's Purdy or Mac Jones. And I know Mac Jones has a connection with Kendrick Bourne, but Jennings 9 times out of 10 has been the one that leads the way, even with Pearsall out there. So if everybody's healthy, I go Jennings, Pearsall, then Bourne, and I would actually obviously throw Kittle in there over Bourne, obviously, but the question is not health, because we can't play that game. That's what I wanted to ask you. When you're trying to make sense of this wide receiver room, do you see it the same way? Or the easy answer might be, and you might even say this, Rich, it might be, this is another Packers. Is the answer that the only consistency we're going to get is the tight end and George Kittle, who just, by the way, had a 0, but that's a whole different story. But is that possibly the answer? Or is George Kittle, I'm going to throw one more at you. I'm shotgunning so many questions at you. Is this the George Kittle is hurt by a healthy CMC issue as well?
Yeah, I wonder if 2 weeks ago when Jauan Jennings, was using the media as a little bit of a voice, right? Like, that's what I wonder too, because he spoke up a little bit and then comes out and gets targeted, right? It's like, all right, was he using that as kind of like, all right, maybe I'm a little bit banged up. I never believed that he had 5 broken ribs, but hey, that's why I was just wondering it. But this particular matchup is tough to chase with him. I mean, first of all, he has only one top 50 scoring week. We like the targets and the way he was used last week, but we didn't get any fantasy points out of it, which is a problem. We still have Mac Jones against this Houston defense, and Mac Jones in any game he's faced a team that can rush the passer has really struggled to produce fantasy points. So it's not a spot I'm expecting like a lot of really efficiency and a lot of opportunity for the pass catchers as well. So then, we just work on a week-to-week basis. Like, then who do the 49ers have, right? Because for 2 years now, the 49ers have been rotating pass catchers. Like, we haven't had like a lot of consistency in terms of who's on the field. Ironically, the one stable commodity they have this year is Christian McCaffrey. He's just stealing all the powers from everybody else on the offense and defense, mind you, too, because the 49ers had even more injuries. Last week, Bryce Huff is going to miss multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. Their center, Jake Brendel, had a hamstring injury. He's going to miss multiple weeks now, too. So it's like the 49ers just keep losing core pieces as well. They did get Kittle back, which is nice. For this individual matchup, it's really tough to pick these guys because the 49ers don't really have like a true slot receiver because they don't play a lot of 11 personnel. So that's where you want to attack the Texans, is kind of the middle of the field. I mean, they had issues with Jackson Smith and Jigba last week, but like, so is everyone. They typically have been really good on the boundaries and against, boundary receivers. Derek Stingley doesn't give up the bag very often, but Jackson Smith and Jigba's just been getting everybody. But this is a game I think it would be like an interior of the field you want to attack. So I would expect Kittle to get targets. That was the first time in his career he had 0 catches. So it's definitely an anomaly. I bet Kyle Shanahan, we're on a first name basis. I almost said just me and Kyle. I bet he dials himself up for Kittle this week. I bet they have some plays that he's going to be the first to read and have some things for him. And then, they're obviously running this thing still through Christian McCaffrey as the engine. So it's a tough week this week, like we said, bye. So I get if you have to play a guy, I do have Jennings the highest between him and Bourne. I do think I have a little more confidence in Kittle this week being involved in the offense than obviously, Christian McCaffrey and the usage that he's been getting this year, which eventually will come back like down to earth. I think like Christian McCaffrey can still be an RB1, but like the way he's been used this year has been out of sheer necessity, which is, which we think will change. Maybe it won't. Like maybe Ayuk comes back, maybe Pearsall comes back, but maybe it's just like the 49ers just keep rotating guys in terms of availability the rest of the year.
He's top 8 in, like, if you put him at wide receiver, he's top 8, which is insane. Just wide receiver only, which is what's insane for Christian McCaffrey. All right. So 2 fun ones before you get out of here. Again, make sure at Lord Reeves, make sure you're following all his work over at Sharp Football. One of the best in the business, as you can tell, knows everything that's everything that's everything. So he's going to know these fun questions. My rankings, my fun ranks this week were wrestling entrances. Like I said, you've been there sitting with me live in New York watching SummerSlam at bars and watching people sing the Cody Rhodes song, something Cody Rhodes. So do you have a favorite? And I said not Undertaker. I put Undertaker at number 2 because I don't want to tell you who my number 1 was in case you say the same. But I do have a 1 over Taker, but Taker feels like the easy one. Everybody takes the Taker. So who's your favorite entrance?
Well, I don't know a lot of the modern ones. I don't watch a lot of modern wrestling. Growing up, my favorite was Rick Rude. Rick Rude is my favorite growing up. Him just coming out and just like attacking the city. I love whatever he was in. Yeah. There are sweat hogs everywhere. Like right, every city was like the home of the capital of sweat hogs. But I always loved Rick Rude for that because like he was just like a heel, would come out and go crazy. Then like doing like the peak of like wrestling, like the Attitude Era of the 90s, like when both like networks were popping off. DX was obviously I think that's my favorite, obviously. The song, like them coming out. And Triple H always in that, because Triple H was like the dude who like would change his intro. Like he'd come out and do something different at every big pay-per-view. So I always like wanted to see like, what's Triple H going to do? Like for this.
He's my number 1.
It's going to be elaborate, right?
The thing is, he had the consistency of every intro and the blowing the water and that song but as you said, and then every big pay-per-view, it was always like just something. Like it was just even like on an epic scale. So like, yeah, Triple H that's why I put him at number 1. The Game over the King and King song, but like that's why I put Triple H. So D-Generation X was number 6 for me. All right, here's the fun one you didn't know coming. And I do this to everybody. I make somebody pick their poison. You have to pick one of these 3. You get 3 options. You don't have a choice. You have to pick one. So it is a bye, but coming out of the bye, your first option is you have to start Jameson Williams every single week. No question about it. I don't care that he sucked this year. I don't care that he's done nothing. He is now 100% in your lineup, whether it's 2, 3 wide receiver leagues. It doesn't matter. Jameson Williams is in your lineup every single week. The second question, similar to what just happened to George Kittle. By the way, the Falcons have given up 10 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown combined to all tight ends this year, including Zach Ertz, K-Dot, and TJ Hawk. They've faced good tight ends. So your number 2 option is you have to start the tight end facing the Falcons for the rest of the year as your tight end. Or number 3, speaking of wrestling, you've been there in person. You've been there to hang out with Eric Young. You have to take your shirt off and let Eric Young chop you in the chest 10 times in a row. Those are your 3 options. Which do you pick?
I'll just do Jameson Williams, man. That seems like it seems like the easiest call. I don't care if he sucked. Like, at least he plays for the Lions. I might like.
I was gonna say. So there's hope. There's hope left for Jameson.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with Jameson Williams this year is the usage that he's getting. You know, Ben Johnson kind of unlocked him as just not a downfield threat to, like, at the end of last year. If you remember, go back to like the last 7 games this year. Like, you look at his box score, like he's getting 5 catches every week, and he wasn't just living on deep targets. Ben Johnson had him running like horizontal routes, and we're back to just him outside of the Chiefs game where he had like a respectable ADOT and was getting some low target stuff. It's just him living feast or famine again. And it's just like a really hard way to live in the NFL in this era, especially where teams are playing like a lot of, shell coverage. They're not giving up big plays. They want you to throw underneath. It's really hurt a guy like Jameson Williams when he used that way. But at least he plays for the Lions. I don't want to play guys like really against, Jesse Bates. And then I'm definitely not. Have you seen Eric's arms? Like, anyone's like, I think Eric Pearsall, like, I ain't letting Eric chop me in the chest. I don't have any muscle. Like, he's like, I just got bone. He's caving my chest in with the one. He might take him 2 rounds.
I was just about to say, if you've seen Kofi Kingston or Chris Jericho at this point in the careers from all the chops they've taken and how their chests look, I don't care. Sweatshirt on, and I'd like one chop, my chest would probably look like that afterwards, because were you there the year that he actually chopped somebody where he's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Like, people don't realize how bad it is. And he did it once to somebody with his shirt on. And he's like, he's like, he begged basically. He's like, I can't, like, I could legit get in trouble because of how bad it is. So I'm glad you didn't pick that one. I thought you might, just because the other 2 options.
I mean, the other 2 are just mental pain. I'll have to save myself from the physical pain. I mean, I've made bad fantasy calls before and start some bad players, but I want to be able to breathe.
Well, thank you for that transition out of here. If you don't want the mental pain and you want to make good fantasy decisions, there you go. You follow at Lord Reeves, follow his work, Sharp Football, just one of the best. You can find every piece of information you could possibly find for every single game, every single week. He will sleep in February, and we'll see him in person next year once again. And thank you again for coming on, Rich.
Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Once again, the terrific, wonderful, good friend of mine, Rich Hribar. One of the best in the business, will continue to be one of the best in the business. Give him a follow, give him a read, give him a listen, everything he does. And I'll be back again. Once a reminder, Fridays, I recap. It's late on Fridays, which I know kind of stinks. You can listen to it on Saturdays. You can listen to it on the Crapper. It's enough. It's quick enough. But I'm going to hit all these injury situations because now we have to wait. It's longer than ever until way late on Fridays at this point. But I will recap everything so you're ready for Week 8 and beyond. Good luck in the Baimapakalaka whatever word that was. Drink a cherry cola from last week. And go check out the top 30 wrestling entrances. I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point.